Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Arts Funders Forum Remake the Model conversation of 2021. Today, we'll be talking about arts funding and how it can drive climate action. We are examining how funders and artists are driving awareness, capacity, understanding, and investment towards climate action. So we want to thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Melissa Cowley Wolf, and I'm the director of the Arts Funders Forum and the founder of MCW Projects. We are very grateful to be hosting today's program in partnership with our friends and colleagues at Expo Chicago during their online presentation, which is a curated digital exposition of contemporary and modern art. So I want to thank Tony Carmen and Kate Sears-Patowski and their team for their ongoing collaboration, and we're thrilled to be included in the lineup you've put together for this weekend. The Arts Funders Forum was created in 2018 to shape the future of cultural philanthropy by focusing on increasing private support for the arts and culture. As you know, we are experiencing the largest intergenerational transfer of wealth in history, but we're seeing these next generation funders turn away from the arts, and we're also been seeing a decline in arts giving. One of the key reasons we've found that these next generation donors are turning away is that they do not see how the arts help drive climate justice. This is a massive problem to solve, and we're working to solve it in partnership with the community. We are an advocacy, media, research, and convening platform. We bring together engaged philanthropists and funders, artists, experts, and influencers to develop new models of impact-driven financial support for the cultural sector. For the last 2 years, we've been building AFF into an institution that's focused on key priority areas: incubating new models of arts funding, promoting arts as a driver of social justice, expanding new frontiers for technology in the arts, developing new narratives about why the arts matter, designing better ways to measure impact, and promoting cross-sector partnerships inside and outside the arts world. We do this in partnership with you, a growing community of over 5,000 funders, artists, and leaders. Research guides our work at AFF, and our first research program in 2019 informed our platform and the projects we've been working on since. This study showed that these next generation philanthropists care deeply about their impact their giving has on their communities, and that we need to develop new models and new narratives to engage them. As a follow-up to that study, we've just launched our second research program called Next Generation Cultural Philanthropy, Driving Positive Social Transformation Through Arts Funding. We're doing this in partnership with Claremont Graduate University, and we're reaching out to folks such as you, the funders, the institutions, corporations, foundations, artists, and beyond, to best explore the intersection of the arts with the other urgent challenges that exist in our world today, such as environment, health, education, racial equity, poverty, criminal justice. We developed these in alignment with the UN Sustainability Goals and other ESG criteria. This research will help us create new programs and tools to share the work that artists and institutions do every day to help raise awareness and capacity for solving our social challenges, and to find new ways to steer capital and funding towards these aims from inside and outside of the arts. So we hope you'll participate in this research. You can find more and take the survey if you go to our website, artsfundersforum.com, and we'll also include a link to that in our follow-up email for today. And we invite intellectual and funding partners to join us on these programs, so please reach out if you want to partner with us going forward. So today's conversation will examine how artists and cultural funders can drive climate action. As I mentioned, climate change and environmental justice are at the forefront of the next generation values and their funding preferences. And the cultural sector has been increasingly engaged in conversations about how it can collectively address this crisis, both with capital, with tangible progress, and how do we tell new stories about how the arts drive change with climate. So we're very excited to welcome three esteemed speakers with us today who are focused on this work from their various areas of expertise. Sarah Sutton is the principal of Sustainable Museums, a consultancy for cultural organizations pursuing climate action. Through cross-sector research and practice to advance the cultural professions around climate action, she connects the sector's work with the global efforts on environment and human health, climate mitigation, and adaptation. Sarah is the cultural sector lead for America is All In, which is the largest coalition of supporters of the Paris Agreement anywhere in the world. In her role as a grants manager for the Frankenthaler Climate Initiative, she runs a new $5 million granting program, which supports energy efficiency and clean energy projects at visual arts institutions. We're going to talk about this today, and they just completed their first application process. Regarding allocating funding to address climate change, Sarah has said, funding for climate action in the arts sector is critical. The appetite is there, but limited funding for alternative approaches to business as usual hold it back. So we're going to talk about that, work on changing that. Our next speaker is Tracey Robertson Carter, a philanthropist and collector dedicated to uplifting equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging by supporting youth initiatives, the arts, and the environment. We need a million Traceys. Tracey is the co-chair of the Artists in Residence in the Everglades, a residency program in partnership with the Everglades National Park. AIRIE empowers artists to think creatively and critically about their relationship to the environment and reveal new paths forward. Since 2001, AIRIE has welcomed over 185 artists, writers, curators, choreographers, musicians, and more, permeating the national and international arts landscape with unique interpretations and stories about the Everglades. Tracey is also a trustee with Miami's New World Symphony, Art in Public Places Miami-Dade, Shelburne Farms in Vermont, and the Chicago Sinfonetta. Also want to offer Tracey our congratulations. She was recently accepted into the Harvard Divinity School. About her work at the intersection of art and climate, Tracey has said, I'm committed to empowering BIPOC artists, uplifting the voices and ideas that need to be heard, and helping preserve the Everglades and make the outdoors accessible for all. Our third speaker today is Zaria Forman. She documents the impact of climate change around the globe in her photorealistic pastel drawings. Zaria travels to remote corners of the globe affected by climate change in order to collect these images, which serve as the inspiration for her work and exhibits worldwide. In 2016, NASA invited her to join Operation Icebridge, an airborne science mission that has been mapping ice changes at both poles for the past decade, collecting critical information about how this loss is occurring and what these changes mean for sea level rise around the world. They've flown over the Antarctica, Greenland, Arctic Canada, and her up-close look at these changes in our environment resulted in her solo show Overview in New York in 2018. Her work has appeared in the New York Times, National Geographic, the Wall Street Journal, and the Smithsonian Magazine. About her work, she has said, climate change is arguably the largest crisis we face as a global society. I feel a responsibility as an artist to address this in my work. If people can experience the sublimity of these landscapes, perhaps they will be inspired to protect and preserve them. So for our program today, I'm going to be speaking with each of our guests one-on-one, and then we'll come together for a group discussion, which will include questions from you, the audience. So please submit your questions in the Q&A box for that section of the talk. Our goal is to leave this conversation with solid takeaways to use for change. So now, enough with me talking. I'd like to welcome our first guest, Sarah Sutton. Hi,
Hey
Sarah.
there.
How are you today?
I am so delighted to be in the company of all of these thinkers and doers on this topic. I'm really appreciative of being here. Thank you.
We're thrilled and honored to have you here. Thank you. Let's dive in because you're doing such amazing work. We need an hour to talk with you. You have written that museums already possess the diverse physical and intellectual resources, the abilities, creative, and freedom and authority to foster the changes the world needs most. So with regards to climate change, my question is, are they? And I want you to set the stage for us today and tell us what you're noticing in the field.
We are increasingly and not enough. So here's the context for it. Museums are charitable, educational, community-focused institutions. That alone should be a moral imperative to do this climate change work. It isn't always, though. So if I were to look at it from a more pragmatic point of view, I would say that our institutions, museums, zoos, gardens, cultural centers, heritage sites, all of them have the talent, the collections, the connections, and the creativity and passion, as well as the data to do this work, to do it really well in a way that engages the public not just governments, in doing this work. We have reliable data, but more importantly, we have the trust of the people to do this work. There are 35,000 museums in the United States. 850 million people before COVID visited these museums. And it's documented in American Alliance of Museums research that Americans trust museums more than any other information outlet in the United States. And they expect those museums to tell them how to behave. So if we take the researchers, the curators, the scientists, the artists, the humanists in our organizations, and let them do the work to use collections that document climate change and that document human adaptation and resilience, they can engage the public in ways that drive the public to change their own behavior and to ask others to change their own behavior in order to tackle climate change. Now, climate change requires a lot of diverse skills. It's not just knowledge, it's skills and abilities to change behavior, empathy, understanding of other people and other situations and their conditions, and the need to protect and care for those other people. And I know that museums do this work better when they don't just use data and facts. That's the science museums and the nature centers, but they employ the arts and humanities in order to unleash creativity that solves the problems in new ways and to create empathy that helps people connect at places that are far away. Like in Zaria's work, she does art so that people can connect to Greenland, to the Maldives, to think about glaciers in ways that they haven't experienced before. And that's critical for getting the public to engage. So I believe that museums have to do the good hard work of reducing their own carbon footprints that drive climate change, but they're equally responsible for engaging the public in ways that helps the public change their impacts on climate. So I don't think that we're doing enough of that work right now, but I do see lots of good action. I think the barrier, though, is that many museums do this work, but they don't talk about it. They don't talk about it because they feel like it might be mission creep. You know, if you're the science or the nature center, right, you're supposed to do this sciencey stuff because it's all about data and facts. But that's only the logic side of our brain. What about the human experiential empathic part of our brain? Well, that comes out in the arts and humanities work. And so when a cultural institution or an arts institution does energy efficiency work or recycling or any sort of work that's good for environment and climate, they don't tell anybody about it because it looks like mission creep and they think they might be faulted for that. I think we need to change that. We need to take responsibility for our own work. We need to talk about it. We need to ask for help and we need to offer help. And if we were to do that work, we could change the world for everyone.
What a great call to action. Thank you. Something we might go back to later, two things you said that were so interesting was the stat that you cited on the trust in museums, because we've seen a decline in trust for our institutions on younger generations. But that stat makes me a little more optimistic. And then also what you said about how museums do the work but don't talk about it. I want to revisit that later because that plays into the issue of narratives and the stories that we tell about the work of the sector that we think need to be changed specifically for this next generation. So it's fascinating. I want to pivot a little bit and ask you about the Frankenthaler Climate Initiative itself, which was launched by the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation, an artist-founded foundation. And if institutions want to make this change and they're being called upon to make this change with regards to climate, they need money. And you're running such a program that helps you bring those aspirations, helps them bring those aspirations to life. I'm really fascinated, and I think this is important to talk about with the funders that we have here today, that the foundation was created to have flexibility in order to address pressing challenges as the times change. And this is really important right now as we're living in a permanent change scenario and things are coming at us so quickly and rapidly. So I'm wondering if you can tell us more about the choice of the foundation to do that and how it allows you to move around within the climate initiative without typical restrictions.
Well, we were blessed with the foresight of Helen Frankenthaler. an artist endowed foundation. She did it during her lifetime, and she founded it and she funded it during her lifetime with a mission to support visual artists and visual arts institutions. But she empowered the board to make decisions about the best way to do that work to support. So she built into it the flexibility to respond to what her core focus needs most at that particular time. And so the foundation has done the expected work of loaning artworks and funding exhibitions, but it's also shifted into doing funding, providing new grants for greater diversity, equity, and inclusion in the field, for doing new research. And then when COVID-19 occurred, for working with other funders in order to create a fund to support visual artists and the smaller arts institutions that were so impacted by COVID. And I feel like that was a natural progression to a climate change project. So this was a particular interest to them because climate change affects all of those issues it's interested in. The social, the health, and the equity issues are all tied up in climate change, and they influence each other. And so by tackling climate change, they help address that. And specifically, the goal is to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from energy projects in museums, because that's a long-term investment in the health of the planet and everyone who resides on it. But it's a short-term solution or an upfront solution for reducing the cost that we have to spend on energy and infrastructure so that we can divert that money to other things. It keeps the institutions lasting longer, and it supports the work they do with art and artists.
That's great. And you recently closed your LOI phase for the Foundation Grant Program, Clean, Efficient Energy and Visual Arts Museums. So can you tell us about the program and the response you received to this first round?
Well, I'm crazy excited about the program and equally excited about the response we got, and the whole team is. So this is the brainchild of Fred Eisman at the Frankenthaler Climate Initiative at the Helen Frankenthaler Foundation. And he and the board and the staff came up with the idea for the program and then reached out to Rocky Mountain Institute, which is an clean energy research organization, and to me, it's Sustainable Museums to implement it. We were super delighted with the response because our purpose was, as I said, to reduce greenhouse gas and displace funds we would have spent on utilities for other purposes. Now, before we got to COVID-19, in museums, the greatest budget line would have been staff and wages, salaries and wages. And right after that would have been utilities. COVID has flipped that, and we can't get away from our utilities. So knowing for a resilient future, we need to be able to bring down those costs. That was a focus of this program. So the idea is that it funds clean energy projects, clean energy generation, or energy efficiency projects. It is broken up into three categories, sorry. Scoping grants, technical assistance, and implementation. The scoping grants will help an institution understand an opportunity or a problem related to how they operate the building, or they could look at the possibilities for generating new energy. So what's the problem? What's the potential? The technical assistance grant is designed to actually get in there and figure out how we would do this new thing, whether we need to have professional staff, professional advisors on the technology, on the energy efficiency, or whether we need to the institution needs to create specifications and plans to implement a project. And then the third category is implementation. And let's get right in there and solve that problem. We know what we want to do. Here is the plan. Now we need the funds to move ahead. And that tends to look like relamping galleries with energy efficient LEDs, or buying a new, much more efficient chiller, or maybe installing a building management system, or actually doing the solar or the geothermal. Now, we had over 100 letters of inquiry, and the great majority of them are strong, actionable, really exciting projects. About half of them were implementation, and the other half were a mix of scoping and technical assistance. And this tells us that the sector is really hungry to do this work. So my partner in this, Jamie Mandel at Rocky Mountain Institute, said that there really is a totally unexpected, unmet, enormous need for green infrastructure in visual arts institutions. And finding funding for that, I mean, Frankenthaler will only be a drop in the bucket for the full scope for the cultural sector in the US. But finding funding for that is critical. And this program is designed specifically to address that. And we found that the appetite reinforces that expectation and actually wows us. It's more than we anticipated, far more sophisticated than we anticipated. We were really excited. So the process really is part of that change I was talking about at the beginning of the interview, about how we have to do the work in our own institutions and we have to talk about it, which we're doing today. Thank you very much. And find partners to expand that work and then tell the other sectors that we've learned something doing this and we have a way to share it. And by the way, when we do it, those 850 million visitors are going to hear about it, are going to learn about it. And maybe that'll add to generalized capacity and normalization of this discussion and of this work. So we're beyond thrilled with the success so far.
Thank you, Sarah. And you guys are definitely a role model here. So I'm really happy that you joined us today to talk about this and hopefully inspiring other funders and foundations to follow in your footsteps. So thank you. We'll see you in a little bit for the group discussion. And now I'd like to welcome Tracey Robertson Carter with us. Hi, Tracey. Thanks for being here. How you doing?
Oh, hi, Melissa. I'm so excited to be here and just good afternoon to everyone. It's great also to be on this panel of amazing women. So thank you.
Yes, we're happy for today. Happy for that. So thank you for being here. Let's jump right in. You are a philanthropist and collector dedicated to uplifting equity, diversity, inclusion, and belonging by your funding work at the intersection of youth, the arts, and environment. Using AIRIE as an example, can you tell us about the impact you see in these other areas by your arts funding?
Yes, and I just want to start. I accept the word philanthropist, but it's more so I'm an advocate and I'm in a position, I'm at an age and a point in my life where my husband and I are very proud that we can do this. And I would say anything that's supporting BIPOC access, which is the new word, Black and Brown, BIPOC, people, humankind, we're thrilled that we can be in that. So I'll accept philanthropist, but I'm just an advocate and I'm just another human being trying to, do more and be a student and learn. So in terms of AIRIE, so artists in residence in the Everglades, we're really, I'm really excited to be part of this group. I do have to do a little shout out to my co-chair, Esther Park, who's been, she's at Oolite, one of the VP programming, another phenomenal woman that I am blessed to co-chair this with, who's been doing work in terms of access for a long time in the arts. But when it comes to AIRIE, we are in a unique position that we're an artist residency that's in the National Park Service. And there are many artist residencies in the National Park Service that are run by the National Park Service and are fantastic. At AIRIE, we have made an intentional decision to make sure that we are the artist residency. We're the only privately funded artist residency in the National Park Service. And we have intentionally made a focus on making sure that we're inclusive. And along with our partners at the Everglades National Park, one of them being the team there led by Pedro Ramos, who's the superintendent of the park, we have a shared mission around inclusivity. And so with AIRIE, what we've done is that we looked at ourselves. Luckily, last year was a difficult year, but also was a year of reflection. And we took time to refocus, look at our 20-year history. I should say we're at our 20th anniversary this year, and looked at who has been part of AIRIE. And when we looked at the artists the wonderful artists that are alumni, and then we also looked back at the reach and the groups that we were reaching out to and who were applying. A majority of that would be people who didn't identify as people of color or BIPOC people. And we wanted to understand why. And where we started was even just talking to our partners at the park. There's a wonderful story. One of our friends, Alan Scott, who's been in the National Park Service for 35 years. Alan shared with us, he's a white gentleman, and he shared with us that the reason that he has a 35-year career is that he had the opportunity as a young man to work for free. And he had the opportunity to work in the National Park Service and to become a ranger or something of that for free. And that is a privilege to be able to do that. That turned into this career. When we're looking at the arts, that's also a privilege to have access. And so when we look back at ourselves, we realize we have to understand why, if we're reaching in all these corners and doing open calls and things like that, why aren't we receiving, applications from folks who would be identified as BIPOC and others, also for our physically disabled friends. And what we did is that we decided, as Esther would say, we need to stop talking in an echo chamber. And we went and pulled together probably one of the best advisory boards, if I can say, that's happening in the country right now. We pulled together a national advisory that includes, if you can let me just share, because one of your own from Chicago, Amanda Williams and Jermaine Barnes, both who are in a monumental show right now at the MoMA. It's called The Black Reconstruction, and please go check it out. We have Mel Chin, who is a MacArthur Genius Grant Fellow. We also have Mikhail Solomon and Larry Osei-Mensah, who are curators of note internationally. Larry, who is someone that is a dear friend to most, I'm sure, a lot on this webinar. And then we have Mikhail Solomon, who is the only African diaspora focused art fair in Miami. And this is a young woman. I call her young because she's younger than me, but she's a brilliant woman that has been doing this for over 9 years and has been working in that world around access. We also have Blake Anthony Johnson, one of my former mentees, who is now the first, another new Chicagoan, one of the first Black CEOs of a symphony in the United States. And then we round out with some other really dear friends. Nasir Dean, you might know him as Note Marcato. Check him out. He is an influencer. He's an artist. He's a poet. He's someone near and dear to me. And he's our young influencer. And he's going to help us to make sure that we are sharing this word, sharing with the world around why it's important for access, and particularly BIPOC access in the Everglades. And then my dear, dear friend who runs 13 Month Productions, his mom, and the head of 13 Month Productions, Nicole Levy. And so where we are now is that we pulled this national advisory together. And most importantly, someone that is very important to us, and I was going to speak about him more later, which I will, is Reverend Houston Cypress. They are someone that looks at the Everglades from many different aspects as an artist, but also as a tribal leader in the Miccosukee tribe. And I wanted to uplift them later on, because I'll do it now, because he talks about art and the importance of storytelling. And so imagine that we have storytelling in terms of what we're talking about around more inclusivity, racial justice, understanding the impact of climate and the connection to racial justice. So we pulled this national advisory together. And again, instead of speaking in an echo chamber, they helped us to understand why we possibly may not be receiving applications. And one of them is that a thought is that our residency is in South Florida. And let's focus more on the word South. South, when you think of Southern areas, it's not as welcoming to particularly our men of color when they think of the South and coming to a residency. We also thought of things around access and removing barriers, around increasing our stipend. It was something that not everyone, going back to what Alan Scott shared with me, not everyone can afford to be away for a number of weeks. And that's something that you have to have the ability to do that, and that ability means that you have to raise the money, but that's my job to make sure that we can support bringing artists and they can know that they can apply for this because there's access. And then thirdly, just making sure that Pedro, myself, and Superintendent Ramos, we've started a series of, I'm going to call them, we had our Zoom debut about a month ago, where we are just in conversation around telling stories about ourselves and some of the challenges, some of the successes that we've had in terms of the work that we're doing around access and different areas. Hopefully my lighting just went.
Still looks great.
Still looks great. Okay, great. And doing that, in order to just create that more welcoming environment. Because when you see the superintendent of the park letting you know that he is aware that in the 75-year history of the Everglades Park, and him being a Puerto Rican and a Miami resident, he's the first Latinx superintendent or senior level person in the Everglades National Park Service. So he's just letting you know, without politics, without anything, we've got some way to go, and we can do this together. So in terms of AIRIE, it's all about it's all about access. It's all around about removing those barriers and making sure that we are appealing to all and that they will apply. And the application's open now, actually, on AIRIE.org.
AIRIE.org.
Sure,
okay.
AIRIE.org,
AIRIE.org.
AIRIE.org.
Fantastic. What an amazing group of leaders you've put together that really drives home the connection between art, access, and climate justice. And I want to drill down a little bit more on that now. We're getting a lot of questions for you about who you collect, and we're going to get to that in the Q&A. So hold on, everyone, for that. But, we're in this moment of extraordinary change, and we firmly believe at AFF that we have the opportunity to remake the cultural funding sector, to be stronger, to be more equitable, and to be more inclusive, and that the funding is the essential part of that. You've said we can't have climate justice without racial justice. And the only way to advance climate justice is to promote the access and the work on social and racial justice. So you mentioned that in your opening statement, but if you can drill down a little bit more on that to inform our audience, what is the connection there, and how does the work that you do in the art funding actually drive justice in those areas?
Yeah. And I have to just always, just expand on, I'm a student, and I'm also a student of the environment. And that statement actually came from a gentleman named David Lammy, who sits in Parliament in England. And I learned that when I went to the TED Countdown. If anyone hasn't been to the TED Countdown online, Sarah, my new friend Sarah, had mentioned earlier around some of the facts that are going on in terms of us getting to net zero. She was talking in terms of museums, but in terms of the world, we know that we need to lower our emissions by 30% in the next 10 years in order to be at net zero in the next 30 years by 2050. So I just share that because when I heard that from David Lammy, I had to learn more. That was his statement around that you can't have climate justice without racial justice. And when you look at the facts, that the people that are most impacted by climate justice are the folks who, are the BIPOC folks who aren't participating. We're not creating the situation, but we are being, they are being tasked with living with it, with everything, from the Flint water crisis to everything that's going on in the world today. So when you can't have, you need people at the table. So one thing that is a fact is that if you have 40% of America being identified as African-American and BIPOC folks, over 40%, but you have such a small percentage of us who are involved in anything around environmental leadership. I do have to mention, I am married. I'm married to a wonderful guy named Christopher Carter, who's a found object sculptor. But he's also sits on the board of Earth University. And I only bring that up because he's an artist. He's always been working in found objects, always bringing new life and contemporary, putting it in a contemporary context. But when I think of the work that the Family Foundation, which is called the Wege Foundation, WEGE, if you'd like to look that up, that it's all around dealing with the intersection of climate, community, we're talking climate and racial, but how the arts, how business, what we do in the environment, what we do as individuals, what we do as institutions, how that all impacts everything. But to answer your question directly, it's around that we need more leaders. And that's why, Chris being now a trustee also with Earth University, which is around developing those next level globally of sustainable companies that are focused on a sustainable mission. And also being a man, being a person of color in that position, we need more of that. And that's where you see that there's the lack of, we're impacted by it, but we're not in position to impact it. So if there's any way in my realm, in this realm of advocating for youth and art and environment and all of us, more equality, I'm definitely a Pollyanna, but with grounded assertions, not just out there in la la land, but I am a hopeful person. And in that realm, in terms of what we're going to do in the arts, you can see that, we are challenging, to bring it back to AIRIE, we are challenging our artists this year. If you look at the application around addressing a prompt, a theme around how to make the environment, and particularly in the environment that they're in, a place of belonging. And it goes beyond just the art. We're not asking the artist to solve the problem. We're asking them to think about this, and through that lens of the artist, really be able to share, and that unique lens, be able to share their thoughts on what that can look like. And as Mel Chin said to us, what does that look like to reclaim that space? But, in short and long, whatever, it really is around the climate and racial. It goes hand in hand, because we cannot have climate justice without racial justice. And that just means that we have to get more people at the table. We have to build a larger table around this environmental conversation. We have to have more in leadership so they can talk about the unique situations that happen in our areas of color and areas of where our people of color and marginalized people are living. And, to bring it back to the arts, I think it's a great place. This is my space of where I think that I can help to make impact.
Thank you, Tracey. And you do make massive impact. We're going to come back to you in a few minutes with the group conversation. Thank you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, I'm going to bring up the artist on our panel, Zaria Forman. Thank you for joining us today.
Hi, thank you.
How
I'm
are
clicking
you?
start video, but it's not able to do it. So, can someone else do it for me?
We will work on that. We are working on that. These tech, a year into this.
Oh, there we go. It works.
A year into this, we're still muting ourselves and figuring this out, right?
I know. Well, it's funny because as an artist, I don't really do that many Zooms. It's like I feel like a dummy now because everybody else knows so much more than me.
You're not a dummy. We're all in this clueless boat together. And as soon as we sort of figure it out, we're gonna move back into person. But we're really excited to have you here with us today. Thank you so much. I want to dive in. We're thrilled to have you here. I want to dive into a project that you worked on, because partnerships are a key pillar of AFF's work. And the sector tells us, as I mentioned earlier, that they believe partnerships and collaborations can drive new models and increase funding. And that is both within and the art sector and also outside the art sector. So I'm wondering if you can tell us more about your partnership with NASA and how you think such partnerships can bring together communities and encourage greater awareness, the partnership between an institution like NASA and an artist such as yourself.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it was a really remarkable experience to get to collaborate with them. When I got the email in my inbox inviting me to fly with them over Antarctica, I was like, this is definitely a prank. But sure enough, it wasn't. A few months later, I found myself at the very bottom of Chile, about to board a flight with a bunch of scientists and engineers from Operation Icebridge, which is a mission that has been mapping the ice at both poles for over a decade now. And they fly on these planes that are basically like flying laboratories. They have all these kinds of instruments like digital mapping system, something called a gravimeter that measures gravity, lasers, radars, an infrared sensor. And we would fly for about 12-hour flights day after day. So a lot of hours in the air together flying just about 1,500 feet over the ice. And I got to fly with them over Greenland and also Antarctica and different parts of the Arctic, so both poles. And so, like I said, that was like a lot of hours in the air with these scientists and engineers. And so that just allowed me so much time to talk to them, to like learn about what they were witnessing, what they were measuring, what we were seeing. It was a whole new perspective, literally, for me to see the ice from above, from that angle. And so that experience really informed and I think elevated my own practice of observing ice. And in turn, I think it allowed my drawings to move towards sort of a more like heightened precision and nuance. There are just so many stories and clues in like the geometric patterns of cracked ice sheets and in the surface of windblown snow, and the colors from above just range so drastically from like deep, deep dark blues to bright neon turquoise. And those colors are actually like a language of, they're a visual language of time and of pressure of the ice. And so yeah, all of that just really informed and I think elevated my own work. And it allowed me to share what I learned with my community, and connect my work to hardcore science and data, which is completely not my realm. I'm an artist. So I think it's really important, and to do that, to have other ways of communicating this data that not everyone understands so easily, to make it kind of more accessible. And, the thing that made me realize that was like, I was sitting there like, why is NASA inviting me, just like this little artist from Brooklyn, to come fly with them? Like that made no sense to me in the beginning until I thought more about it and conversed with them and realized like, oh, they've been doing this for a decade. And we are still nowhere near where we need to be in terms of solving this crisis. And so clearly they just need all the help they can get to help educate the masses and to translate their, hard scientific numbers into something that's like a little bit more graspable. That's not a word, but, like a little bit more accessible.
And they see the artist as the way to deliver that message. Yeah,
they did. So I felt kind of a big responsibility to pull through, and I did my best. I'm still working on it, and it's always a learning process. But I just learned so much from having those hours with them in the air and just getting to ask them so many questions, and to have that opportunity to connect my work with the hard science. The exhibition that I had, or the first one that I had with that whole body of work that was inspired by those flights, I was able to continue communicating with them after the flights, and I would show them the images I was working from and the drawings I was creating, and ask them like, okay, what's this? Are there any details here? Or what does that texture in the ice tell you? Or how many miles are we looking at? Like I used a lot of, they had a camera that was strapped to the belly of the plane, shooting images directly downward. It takes pictures every 2 seconds. That's part of their digital mapping system. And so I was able to use some of those images for inspiration for my drawings. Other inspiration came from photos that I took myself out the window of the cockpit or whatever. But for those, I was able to send them, the section of the image I had chosen, and they could tell me exactly the coordinates of where we were, the time of day and year, of course, the exact date that we were flying over it. And then what we were looking at, what was happening in the ice and why they were measuring it. And so in turn, I was able to collect that information and have a little, paragraph next to each drawing in the actual exhibition. So, the drawings, the imagery that came out of that work are pretty abstract looking. They're not, it's our Earth, but they're these views that, almost nobody has ever seen. We were flying over some parts of Antarctica that are just so remote, like nobody goes there. And so So it's not, you look at an image and you might not know what you're seeing unless there's like a description. So that's why I really wanted to have that there so people could understand, like, this is our planet. It looks otherworldly and you want to use that word, but this is our planet, and this ice is affecting the entire globe as it melts.
It's such a cool opportunity that they gave you and therefore the art world to tell this story. And going back to something Sarah mentioned at the beginning about the opportunity that museums have to tell that story, and that some have shied away from it because of mission creep, as she said, but to get more to establish more partnerships like you've had with NASA, and to get more work that results from that into the museum so that people can see the connection and how artists are the driver of communicating the change that's needed is vital. I'm being cognizant of time here because I know we're running out of time, but I'm going to ask you another question, then we're going to go to a group discussion. And I know we have some audience questions for you as well, but you've spoken with audiences at Google, with Amazon, Patagonia, Mercedes. And so I'm wondering, from your view, what role private enterprise plays in supporting creatives like you who are doing this work and ensuring that this work is visible and funded? What insights do you have for us here about how private enterprise can support it?
I think they can do a much better job than they do. I mean, I think they're starting to move in the right direction for sure, by giving a platform to people who are trying to make this world a better place. But sometimes I think it can be a little misleading. Like all of those companies that you just mentioned, actually, none of them sponsored me in a fiscal way, but they did give me a platform to speak about my work and to their audience, which is a wide one, and that's wonderful. And that's not to say that there aren't other companies that are sponsoring me fiscally, because there are, but I just think so. Yeah, I think we're moving in the right direction. I think typically it's, companies do that because they want to align themselves with those more altruistic views of, that are of the people that they're highlighting. And so it's not always, I think of course their like main role is to make money, right, for their investors. But this is, like I said, a step in the right direction. And I think the more that the people, the more that their audience asks for that and wants to see them highlighting people who are dedicating their work to making the world a better place, the more they demand that, the more the companies will really hear it and do it. And that's, I sort of use that as an umbrella thing. Like, obviously Patagonia is a fantastic company and they've always been doing good from the very start. So yeah, that was a bit of a rambly answer, but I do think that they can do a better job. They have deep pockets, and they should use those deep pockets to support and highlight people, again, who are trying to make the world a better place. And because they're the ones that really have the money, they have the influence, and they can, and it's really important.
And the cultural sector, it's our responsibility too, to present more work like yours so that the general public and these corporations are making the connection between how artists and the art can drive this change. So you make a great point. Thank you so much. I'm going to pull up Sarah and Tracey to join us. Please stay with us. And let me see. Okay, we got Tracey. Hi, guys, ladies, again.
Hi.
You all have such interesting things to say, and I wanted to give everyone enough time. We need a couple more hours, but I want to go to a couple questions that have come in from the audience, also allow you to respond to each other. But Tracey, we've gotten a few questions on collecting. I want to go back to this. This is an art. We're doing this in partnership with Expo during their digital art fair. So we have collectors with us today. You're a collector, and so I want to ask you how acquiring work by artists like Zaria who promote climate justice and other artists whose work addresses justice and change, how can collectors advance this work by collecting artists, and who are some of the artists that you collect in particular? People want to know.
That's a good one. I'm like Zaria. It's such a pleasure to meet you, and I want to learn more about your work. I hope we can say badass on this thing, but you are something else.
Yes.
Both of you and Sarah, everybody. So part one around, I'm actually, and I want to say thank you, Melissa, for introducing me to Zaria's work. I actually, I think that's a great way to answer this question, because I'm very interested because of what we've spoken about, because I've talked about the intersections between climate justice and racial justice, the work I'm hearing that you're doing, Zaria. I would love to learn more about not only your work, but then others that are working within the environmental, vein, and connecting that with their artwork. So right now, I think that's the best way to answer that, because everyone who's watching is watching this live. I'm looking at like, okay, I want to learn more about Zaria, and it would bring me great joy to have that type of work in our home and to support that work. I'm very driven by connection to the art and hearing what you're doing, Zaria. I'd love to learn more about it. So I hope that answers that one well, because I'm just being real. This would be outside. I don't mean to keep mentioning my beautiful husband, but he's been a found object sculptor for so long. So that's one of my main I live within the work. I'm living in a house that is built with found objects, old used containers and things like that, and used shipping containers, sorry, and floors that were salvaged from barns and other things over the last 20 years, and we're living in a contemporary space that also is very much around using recycled materials and other things. So I'm really drawn to that. So I'd like to learn more. If others are out there, I'd love to learn more about your work as well. In terms of who I collect, there's one behind me. You can see that's an original Amanda Williams. I don't know if she's here today, but she knows I'm very proud of that work because Amanda's a friend. She's one of the highlights recently outside of her current MoMA show was being one of the representatives of the American Pavilion at the Venice Biennale. And I was there with Expo folks and that wonderful support that happened through Chicago. So Amanda Williams, Alejandro and Mora Sina, they're actually artists, neon artists that created a technology. Sorry, I thought I got rid of notifications. That created a technology out of MIT. Alejandro must be about 80 years old right now. And we're thrilled. We have a number of works from him. I have a lot of work from African diaspora artists, and also I'm American, but I'm a first generation American. I'm a Jamaican, and my father was born in Cuba, so I'm really drawn to Jamaican contemporary art. Grew up with that. In my mother's home in Jamaica, we have a lot of intuitive work that's there. Including artists like my Aunt Patsy Mayer, who's been a Jamaican artist for a long time. And then, but in our personal collection, I'm just looking around, it's a lot of African diaspora work, a lot of contemporary work. And then, but I could tell you my wish list. I am definitely, I recently, thanks to, I think I'm just doing plugs all day, but check out Oolite, guys. I signed up for this wonderful thing they call Shares, and we were able to start to engage with a lot of local Miami artists, and that's really important to me as well. So I have Adler Gurria's work, I have Morel Doucette, I have Elite, I have a whole bunch of local Miami artist work, but I am looking for, I'm almost close to getting a Jared McGriff. That's something my husband and I are about to purchase some work from him, and shout out to Jared, as well as T.S. Mansa. It's another artist that I've been following his work for many years. And another truth, we just finished building a home. So now we're out of building a home phase, and I'm really looking forward. If you could see, there's a lot of white walls. So I look forward to collecting more, but and a lot of work from Africa. Thank you.
Thanks, Tracey. That's great. I know from our programs, people really want to hear names, so it's great. Question for Sarah and then Zaria, and then we'll do some last comments here. We need another hour. Sarah, we have cultural leaders, board members, and funders with us today. And I know they'd love to hear from you on, some low-hanging fruit, if you will, to advance their work. And, one way to phrase this is, what's the most overlooked in a museum's work on this issue? What do they overlook the most? And what's the most common or best place to start And then second to that, if you could name some institutions that you think are really at the forefront of this, I think people would love to know that as well.
All right. The first thing is to reduce our own institutional impacts. It's also the most common, fortunately, as in measuring and monitoring our impacts. So do you know how much energy you use? Do you know where it comes from? Is it clean? Can you reduce it? And who do you need to work with in order to cut that back? But not everybody's in charge of their energy use. So if you are not in charge of that, your job is to tell your museum you want to know what it's doing and you want it to share that with the public, its energy use. And then you call your local and national leaders and you tell them that an ambitious, nationally determined commitment to the Paris Agreement is critical. So next week, when the US announces its own NDC, hope and pray that it's 50% by 2030, because that's a minimum of what we need to be announcing. So ask for that work and get behind it yourself would be my personal preference. And then if I had to say who's doing it the best, I'm learning about more arts organizations doing it through the Frankenthaler. And therefore, because it's live, I'm not going to name names, sorry. But outside of visual arts, the Phipps Conservatory and Arboretum in Pittsburgh is a game changer organization for net zero and for engaging the public. And the Science Museum of Minnesota is a leader like you wouldn't believe. They've already got a net zero commitment. And we need more museums to get on board with that. It's hard and it's critical.
Thank you, Sarah. It's great, tactical and great. Zaria, as an artist, want to end with this question for you. Almost all of the speakers that we've worked with in our discussions, especially over the last year, have emphasized that it's artists like you who are guiding us forward, offering us the solutions to our most urgent challenges, and specifically around climate, such as the work that you do. So one of our focus areas for AFF is to advance that narrative and promote it to the general public and get the sector to understand that in order to see increased funding, we need to tell different stories that are, as I mentioned at the beginning, more in line with the next generation values and views. And one of those, of course, is climate change. So as an artist, and if you can tell us, what stories should we be telling to our organizations, our funders, our collectors, and your work engages the general public more, more than some that we've seen. What stories have worked for you? What's sort of the elevator pitch that you as an artist give and that you've seen resonate about how the work of artists is driving change, specifically with regards to climate?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that there are so many stories to tell. I don't think there's just one. And I think what's critical is that the artist or the person doing the work finds what they feel most passionate about, because that's what makes the best work, I think. And then that's what people respond to the best. At least that's been my own personal experience. I feel like, I grew up visiting really remote, faraway landscapes. And so I have this deep, deep love of landscape. And when you love something, you want to protect it, right? So that's why my work has always been about showing you these places that you might not have the chance to actually visit in person. And by showing you the beauty of these places, I hope to inspire you to want to help protect and preserve them. And I think just in general, as an umbrella statement about art, and why I think it's important, why I think it's critical for us to be these change makers, or at least to try to do that, is because psychology tells us that humans take action and make decisions based on our emotions more than anything else. That's proven. And so also art has this very special ability to tap into those emotions. And that's not just something I think, that's like also scientifically proven that it does. So for me, when I make these big drawings, I'm just trying to create immense images that are overflowing with detail, that draw you in. And, envelop you and make you feel like you're there and like you've been transported. And so yeah, I think it's important for everyone to know that specifically about art, that we have the power as artists to change, to sway people to take action and to make decisions that are going to help make this world a better place. And it doesn't need to just be about climate or landscape. There are so many things, there's so many stories that we have to tell. And so I think it's just a matter of finding what, for each individual artist, what's really important to them. And just to add one more thing too, I've done a bunch of curating lately in the last couple of years. And it's been such a joy for me to be able to search and find other artists. Tracey, you and I should talk offline about all of this, because I love, I love everything you said. And I've been really trying my hardest to find, especially BIPOC artists, underrepresented artists in general, but especially BIPOC, to represent on these in these exhibitions. They've been to ship-wide exhibitions on National Geographic expedition ships. And so it's a great opportunity for artists, but it's also just been so fun for me to discover other artists who are working in the realm of climate. And there are so many stories that are being told there, and they're so rich and beautiful. And it's just been a joy to create this kind of community. And so, yeah, it's been really fun to be able to share that with a wider audience. And I hope to continue to be able to do that. So it's not just my own work.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that's a beautiful place to end. And, the cultural sector, we have to tell these stories and share the work of artists like you. But we've heard today from you on the strength of the artists to tell these stories about our most urgent challenges. We've heard about how to fund artists and arts organizations in order to do this work and get those stories out and examine these intersections in our areas of justice where we need to drive change. And we've heard about how the cultural sector can institutionally advance change and be a role model. So I want to thank you all very much for being here with us today. It was such a pleasure. We need much more time. I hope you'll all come back, maybe join us in December at our annual summit to dive deeper into these issues. So ladies, thank you so much. I want to thank again Expo Chicago for your partnership and collaboration. I want to thank the team at the Arts Funders Forum and M+D, Sean McManus, Brett Dobbs, Samantha Keel, and Kinga Christian. I want to thank Jennifer Joy and her team at Sutton for amplifying the work of the Arts Funders Forum. And I want to thank you all for joining us and participating in our dialogues over the last couple years, and hope that you'll continue your engagement with us. You'll know where to find us, info@artsfundersforum.com, on LinkedIn, on Instagram. So please offer your voice to our research survey by visiting the website as well. Thank you all so much. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody. And happy Earth Day in a few weeks.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you all. It was a treat.
Thanks.
Thank you. It's such an
Thank
honor.
you.